We were just at the start of a promise, the fetch promise. So the fetch command is promising to return back some kind of data from like a server. Whenever you are about to reach a server, like a web address using the fetch command, it's always a good idea to just grab the URL, place it in the browser directly in the address bar. So I will send the URL so you can see it in your browser, and just check what comes back, either as like raw, output, or maybe you can use this. I'm using the JSON formatter extension that kind of like helps me see this structure in a nicer, cleaner way. So it's always a good idea to just open up the browser, place the URL, and see what comes back, and try to spend some time like to figure out what's the structure. So in the Chuck Norris jokes silly API, we get back an object. So this is it's using like a response in JSON, what it's called JavaScript object notation. So it's kind of like a text, but it resembles like the structure of a JavaScript object, because JavaScript objects are a really nice way to structure data together. So we have an object that has like a few properties, so categories created, blah, blah, blah. They're nicely highlighted as white on the left side, and then the corresponding values of these properties are on the right. So an empty array for categories, a created date, an icon for, let me see what we get back. Not found. Okay, that's some ID, the URL of this joke, because every time we open this URL, we get a random joke. There's also a value for this particular joke. So if I like this joke and I want to keep it, I will just store the URL somewhere, So whenever I open it, I see the same joke again. The jokes are slacking. So if I open this, the jokes are slacking. So this is a web page. As you can see, this is not a JSON respan. This URL actually gives me back like a normal web page, like an HTML, right? And then there's a value that contains a string. As you can see, all of these are strings. The categories is an empty array. So spend some time to actually see what's happening in the browser, and check the structure. It's important because once you get this structure back, you will have to deal with it in JavaScript. So if it's an object, you have to use object properties. If it's an array, you have to loop. If it's like, I don't know, like a string or something else, you have to think of ways to actually manipulate the data, which is something really important. Now, let me just request another API that has like a slightly different structure. So this API is just called a JSON placeholder, which is just for people that want to like play around and learn, to work with JSON APIs or fetch and stuff like that. So So you can see this is also text response in JSON format, and if I use the formatter, you will see there's a slightly different structure coming back if I compare it with Chuck Norris. So the first thing you can do, this extension is nice because I can fold this and I can hide this, and I can see that what I get back from this URL is an object, because I see the curly brackets. This in JavaScript means that we have, like, most of the time this is an object, right? So when we close some properties inside curly brackets, we get an object. So Chuck Norris returns an object, which means if we want to manipulate or access an object, we have to use the properties, object dot something. In this case, if I fold the root element, you will see there's an array. We have the square brackets. So what I get back from this JSON placeholder is an array, not an object. And I can see this this extension gives me back the number of elements inside this array. So I can also go inside and I can fold like there are many elements. the 100, so I won't follow all of them. But what you can see is that this array includes 100 items that are objects. So the second level, I'm also folding because I want to see like the overall structure. We have an array of 100 objects. So I have a list of objects. And if I open up, of course, one of them, I can see there are some properties, user ID with a number 1, ID with 1, title, body. These are just some Latin dummy text, the lorem ipsum. So just some example. And then we have another object with same user ID, different ID, and stuff like that. So I would suggest that you open up these APIs that return these JSON objects. The servers can send us back any kind of thing like images, JSON objects, HTML, even audio, PDF, whatever. And then after we finish the lecture, I will suggest that you go out there and search for free JSON APIs and try to find some interesting APIs that will return some kind of thing like that might be useful or funny, like I don't know, the weather API or like free API. Let's see, and try to run these addresses in your browser. So I will just open up one for now, but later on you'll have some time to work with this. So this is an API that sends back a fact about cats. Most cats adore sardines. Okay. One reason that kittens sleep so much is because a growth hormone is released only during sleep. Okay. Anyway, you can see some things. Now, so open up it in the browser, see what comes back, see if something comes back. Maybe the API or the server is like it's not working, and then you go back to JavaScript and kind of like know what to expect. Okay, so we got back a promise. So remember in the diagram, so whenever you get a promise, there are two things that can happen. Either the promise resolves successfully or it can like reject. So once I have a promise, so response is a promise. I saw that through the console log. Let me put it here. It's always nice to use the console log to see things out in there. Now, once I have a promise, there are two things I can do. Is I can handle the success, and I can handle, or I must handle the error. Okay, or the failure, let's say. And I do this by, I will put this. So once I have a promise, I can use the dot notation and then a call to the then function. So the dot notation reminds me that this thing is an object. So whenever we use the dot notation in JavaScript, so for example, I say console.log, I know that this is an object and it has some properties that I can access through the dot. So the console has a property that's called log, and it's a function. Remember, an object is just a collection of properties that can like have various values, and I can access these values using either the dot notation, object.b, object.a, either through the dot notation, which is the most common one, or through the bracket notation, which is slightly different. I have to use the brackets, the quotes, either single or double or backticks, and then the name of the property. So I cannot write just a. And I can get back the same value. As you can see, this has like 2 characters. This has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that's why we tend to prefer the dot notation most of the times, which means that whenever you see something like console.log, you have to think that there's an object somewhere in JavaScript. This is not something that we create. This is something that JavaScript gives us for free. So there's, let's say, something called console which is an object and has a log property that contains some function. That's why we can actually call this property and then put the parentheses to call this. So it is a function. Now note here, we use the term method whenever an object property is a function. So whenever the value of an object property is a function and not something like a primitive, like a number or a boolean or a string or an array, we tend to say object method instead of property. But you will find people referring to this as an object property, the log property of the console object, or the property, whatever. So just some terminology here. So this means that when we say response.then, there's actually an object that came back from the fetch. So there's some kind like an object. I would say this is a constant response, and there's a then, which is a function, right? So you can think of it as an object that has this property. That's why we can say dot then, right? So the response that we get back, the promise, I use the response variable because this is actually referring to what kind of promise I get back. This is a response that comes from the server, so I use the term response instead of just data or something more generic. And I can use then to actually handle the success. Now, what do I need to pass in here? You can see that it's a function, and let me run the code again to see whether I'm okay. Nothing happens because I called then, but I need to pass an argument here. Then by default doesn't do anything. Yes, Leon?
I want to ask, then you said then is a function.
Yes. Whenever we see the parentheses after some kind of identifier, there's most of the times that's a function call. So it's a function, yeah.
But if it is a function, we can also is it a self-running function? Is it running by itself?
What do you mean?
We don't have to call it after. It is running by itself when you type dot then, and when you put something inside the parentheses, then it will run, right?
Yes, but this is a manual call. We actually wrote then, so it's not running on its own. We have to write this.
Yeah, if we write this, then the then after it is calling by itself. We don't have to run it to type it after somewhere else, then parentheses, so it will run.
Well,
right?
This call is we need to call it. Right now we're calling it, and it's going to be executed exactly because we call it. So
yeah, so it's self-running.
I'm not sure what you mean by self-running. Whenever we call a function, it's going to get executed.
It is declared and called at the same time. That's what.
No, it's not declared. This is not this is not a function declaration. This is a function call.
Oh, okay. Then it's declared somewhere else.
Exactly.
And so can we also declare a function inside that function?
Yes. In general, we can define functions in many places in JavaScript. But this is a function call, so this function is declared somewhere inside JavaScript. We cannot really see this declaration, let's say. But in here, we're just calling it. We're not declaring it or defining it. This is not our part. But we're manually, explicitly calling it. Otherwise, it wouldn't be called. And of course, it executes some code that it should be. Okay, so let's move on and have this more questions coming in. It's quite interesting. So the then function is going to handle the success. Now, the way that it's going to handle the success is by providing a function. So we need to provide a function here as an argument, which makes things slightly a little bit more complicated. But the thing that we need to pass as an argument is a function. Remember in some of the previous lectures, we talked about this ability of functions to actually be passed as arguments. They can also be returned from functions. So JavaScript is pretty powerful with functions. So we can also pass a function, and I can either directly define and pass a function like this. This is called an anonymous function. But because the syntax is a little bit weird, at this point, I will have to define a function, name it handle success. So define a function, give it a name so that it's clear and it makes more sense. So I'm defining a function. I will just console log the name of the function to see when and how this function is going to be executed. So as you can see, this is a function declaration. This code is not going to run. This is just waiting for us to call it. So define or declare a function, it stays there in memory and waits for you to actually say, handle success. And this is the only time when it's going to be called and execute and see the handle success here. Okay? So function declaration, remember the distinction. This is function declaration, just some code, some function waiting to be called, to be executed. And this is the function call. Now, the response then method accepts a function. So once I have defined the function, I pass the function here as a reference. I'm not going to call that function. This is not my responsibility. I don't want to call this function at this point. I'm just passing this as an argument to this function, and then it's the responsibility of this function to be doing something with this argument. So this is not our code, but just to let's imagine that somewhere right now inside JavaScript, there's a function called then. We never declared this. JavaScript gave it to us. And specifically, the response object has this function. And then it accepts one argument. Here, of course, it's called a parameter. When we call the function, we say an argument. And when we define the function, we call this a parameter. And then at some point, it's the responsibility of this function, when it gets called, to actually do something with this function. So since this parameter is a function, I can say function param. And then at some point, then we'll actually call this function, which is a little bit weird. I want to stay a little bit. So then is accepting an argument. In here, I'm passing this handle success. So the handle success, which refers to this function, is going to end up here when we call this function. There will be some code running inside the function body. And then at some point, line 1, line 100, whatever, it's going to call this function parameter. Since this is a function, we can add like parentheses, and then this code will be executed. But this is what will happen. We call this function, we pass an argument, the argument ends up here, it's a function, and then we'll execute, we'll run some code that we cannot really see. And then at some point, so code here, maybe code here, and somewhere inside this then function, this function is going to be called. And then this is when we're going to see this handle success. So this is hidden away from us, but this is how you can imagine what happens somewhere in memory. There's a function that it accepts a parameter. That parameter is of type function, and then this function should do something with this value. And since this is a function, that it makes sense to actually call this this function. So the question is this function is hidden. So someone else wrote it, and the question is who wrote it. So it's the people that created the browser. So the people actually that created these fetch. So these fetch, which does a fetch request and creates a response. There's some JavaScript code behind this, and this is something like like everything in JavaScript, like console, for example. We never wrote this function, right? It was just there in the browser for us. So these are built-in functions. These are commands that are given to us by the creators of the language or the creators of the browser so that we can use them. So it's ready to use code, but unfortunately we cannot see the code unless we're like C++ developers, because JavaScript is itself programmed in another language. So Leon?
I'm a little bit confused about the then function. You are using the function we have declared earlier, handle success. You are using it as a parameter. What is the difference if we call it inside then?
That's a great question.
Can we have two examples and see the difference between them and what is happening, what is really happening? Because when we are getting the response and having then, we are going to have some code. So what are we going to do? Are we going to call functions in there, or are we only going to declare them as parameters?
Okay, that's a great question. We certainly have to clarify this. So the question is like, I will put these two cases that I think Leon is asking. So what's the difference between this? Let me put some space here. Okay, I will either use this or this. Okay, I cannot use response then and then again response then. Well, I can, but I won't. I'm just pasting this side to side so we can see. So actually, Leon, that's the question, right? What's the difference between calling the function here, just passing?
Yeah, I'm confused. How are we going to use then? Are we going to use it declaring calling functions in there, or declaring functions that are declared externally as parameters inside then?
Okay, so the quick answer to your question is we're going to be using this syntax. We're not going to call the function. We're just going to declare some function and then pass that function as a reference, as a variable name, let's say, inside the then. We're not going to be using this. You are going to rarely see this syntax, like a function getting called inside then. This is like very, very rare. I won't go into details because it's very advanced and probably not going to use it, but this is the short answer is you're going to use this, okay? But we have to understand the difference between these two syntax. So let's have a discussion. Let's have like let's say Q&A now. What do you think is the difference between this and this syntax? What happens in the first case? What happens in the second case? Like in general, not just in this promise. Then, like in general, what's the difference between the syntax of a function name with and without parentheses? In both cases, we are calling then. Okay, we have then, which is a function. We put the parentheses. So then it's called in both cases. We are executing then. We're calling then in both cases. The difference is what we're passing in here as an argument. In the first case, you're correct. This is a function call. So in here, we're calling this function. In both cases, we're passing what is called an argument. Okay, there's this distinction between arguments and parameters. Parameters is when you define a function and you fill in here the parentheses with some placeholders. So you can think of parameters as placeholders. And when we call the function and we supply value here, we call this an argument. This is very common reason of confusion and mixing arguments and parameters. But it's basically that's the value that we pass that should become a parameter. In both cases, we're passing a value that will end up here as a parameter. So we're calling them in both cases. In both cases, we're supplying an argument. The difference is that the argument is slightly different in these cases. So we will end up with some value here, but we're trying to, so the difference is that in the first case, when JavaScript goes into this line, remember the parentheses are in JavaScript, they are sort of like a focus point, like a magnifying glass. This is where we say to JavaScript, hey, I want you to pay close attention to this pair of parentheses, like try to focus there first. So whenever JavaScript sees some parentheses, it tries to start with that evaluation first. So in here it sees a call, it sees a set of parentheses, so it's a function call, and it says, okay, I have to focus on this part first. Now inside this parentheses, there's another set of parentheses. So now it goes inside the parentheses and say, hey, no, I have an even more important thing I should focus first. So I have to first focus on this. So it first goes inside the innermost, let's say, set of parentheses, executes this function. The function execution will return back a value. Functions always get, when we call the functions, always return some kind of value. So this will bring back some return value. This will become A, B, C, whatever, we don't know. And then after we get this value, then it will get this value, pass it as an argument to then, and then it will go to the execution of then. So now I want to clarify this. So I will create a new pen to give you like an idea I had earlier about these functions, so that you understand this syntax. Let me open the console. I just don't want, let me see. Console log. Okay, is it running? Is it, am I writing CSS or? Let me see just. Okay, yeah, I'm running JavaScript. Okay, so here's something that I was thinking that might help you understand some very, very important concepts when we have functions. So functions are just, now you will understand why I say chicken. When we define a function, I will name it chicken. What do chickens do? They lay eggs, right? So functions is just some code. Now it's just two simple lines of, silly stuff. So functions are just a way to have some code rerun again and again, only when we want to run, and reuse that code again and again. So we define a function, and we say whenever that function gets called, just run some code and then return some value. Remember that there's always a return statement at the end of a function. By default, it's going to return undefined. Okay, if we don't put anything, there's going to be the undefined. But most of the times, we want to return something else. So, like an egg. Okay. Now, let me just clear the console so we get rid of this every time versus. Okay. So function is just some code, lines of code that wait to be called and executed. At this point, there's no code run. We have to call the chicken, right? So only if I call the chicken, it's going to lay some eggs and it's going to, once again, if I call this function again, 2 or 3 times, boom, 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 okay? Now, why am I using the chicken egg analogy? Because one thing I want you to keep in mind, maybe this mental model will help you, that every time there's a function call, and I hope this syntax helps you remember the act, every time there's a function call, the chicken is going to lay an egg, vanish, and leave that egg in its place. That's how function works. So we have a function call, it lays some egg, and then vanishes. It just goes away. So whenever you see a function call, the parenthesis will remind you that there's an egg that's going to be laid out. So this is how a chicken will just sit, lay an egg, and afterwards, there will be some egg, some value in its place. So whenever you see a function call, just try to imagine or predict what the egg will be after this function call. In this case, the egg that this chicken is going to lay, it's the return value. That's the egg part. So a function is like a chicken that lays eggs. So this, when JavaScript runs this code, it will replace this after the function call with egg. So this is the egg. This is the egg that the function will lay. So I want you to have this, unfortunately I cannot fold here, but whenever you see a function call, I want you to get into this process of trying to imagine what kind of value, what kind of egg will be laid back at this place. This will get replaced. When the code runs, this will get replaced. So remember that this will go away and there will be some egg laid here. The chicken will go away. It's not its responsibility to stay there forever. It's going to sit, lay an egg, and then go away. So in this case, the egg that this function is going to lay is the return function. You should, my suggestion is to always lay your own eggs. Otherwise, you will have undefined. There are some cases where you're not really interested in laying an egg, in returning something. For example, if this function is all about console logging something, then you probably don't need to return a value. If you're not going to do something with the egg here, then all you need is just a console log. But I would say that just to get more deep into JavaScript, always return something, even if it's something irrelevant, like return true or return success. Just return some value. Yeah, yes. So you remember that there's always some return value. So whenever we see a function call, remember, in your mind, get rid of the chicken and try to predict or imagine the egg. So I will give like 3 examples so we can see what kind of eggs we're going to get to see. So I have like function chicken 1, return 5 plus 5. So let me just, I will close the console so we can just predict. So chicken 1. So here's a chicken. Now, when JavaScript actually runs the code, remember, the chicken will lay an egg, it will disappear, and in its place, precisely in here, this will be replaced by an egg. Now, at this point, I want you to tell me what's the egg here. That's going to be like, it's 10, exactly. So the result here is 10. Okay, let's go to chicken 2. Now it's going to be, let me, first of all, let's see the result. Chicken 1. Okay, I will have to like console log this whole thing just to see it. Let's see, 10, that's the egg, that's correct. But we also like incorrect answers because we learn more. Now, chicken, let's say console log, chicken 2, and then I'm going to say here maybe return A plus B, and then here 5 plus 3. So I will get rid of the console just to see. So we have a chicken. Okay. Remember, the chicken will do something, will bring an egg, and then it will be replaced by the egg. It will go away and it will leave us with an egg. So in this case, what kind of egg will we see? Will JavaScript see after the 8? Exactly. So this function is going to be called. 5 is going to land here. 3 is going to land here. Right. So there will be a 3 here. This is going to be 5. So A will be 5, B, sorry, A will be 5, B will be 3, A plus 5, 8, and then we'll get back. Let's see whether we can see the answer here. Maybe we're missing something. And indeed, we get 8. Okay, now slightly more interesting is this. We covered a little bit about this function, returning function. So I have a chicken 3. Okay. There's a parameter here, or I would like placeholder. If you want to remember, like a great mnemonic, a great thing that reminds you of things that I learned back ago, and it helped me distinguish between arguments and parameters, is that a parameter, I like to remember it like this. So a parameter which starts with P, it's actually a placeholder. It's not a value, it's a placeholder. It will hold a value. An argument, on the other hand, when we call a function, an argument is the actual value. So in the beginning, I was confusing parameters and arguments. So I said, okay, P placeholder, something is going to land here. And argument A, actual value. So this is the value that's going to be placed in the placeholder. So you have this confusion at first, you can use this kind of like a memory trick. So let's see. I'm going to return the placeholder. And I'm going to say chicken 3, let's say 5. Now, at this case, there's a chicken, and there's like some egg that is going to be laid. What's the egg? It's 5, exactly. Okay. I want console log, it's 5. 5, it's the argument, the actual value that gets landed on the placeholder, the parameter, gets returned, so I get just like a feedback loop. Now, what's interesting is this. I will define a function called cool, and it will just console log cool. Not pretty cool, but. And I'm going to pass cool as an argument. Now things get interesting here. So now there's going to be an egg, right? There's always an egg coming after a chicken, or gets called, let's say. Now, what is the egg? Okay, so we have one suggestion that the egg is going to be, let's say, like a console log. So, okay. We undefined, there's, okay, we have like, so we have cool on the console. Nice. We have undefined. Any other suggestions? We will check them. You always have egg. That's important. Remember, there's always an egg. Okay? Function is a chicken that lays an egg. This is a rule that you cannot like break. So there's always an egg. Maybe it's undefined, but it's an egg. It's an undefined egg. Okay. But any other suggestion, like
unexpected value.
Like what do you mean? An error?
We are putting.
Like what will be in the place? What will replace this line after the chicken has vanished? Will they neg? What kind of value? What kind of thing will be here? Well, we call chicken 3. We pass a value, an argument, and that will end up here, right? Placeholder will become, you know, what's in cool, and then we will get back cool. So you can think that this will be cool, and we'll get back cool. Okay? If I use the same parameter, but I won't because I don't want to use like the same. This is a placeholder. It can accept any value, so just more generic. So cool is going to end up here, and it's going to get returned. So what's the value of cool? What's cool? My question, another question might help you. Is this a chicken laying something, or is this something different? We have cool here, so it's defined. Function, the cool is defined. So we have something that's cool, and it's a function. But is this like the chicken 3? We know it's a chicken, but can we say that cool right here is a chicken? Are we using the chicken that lays egg syntax, or is this slightly different? Or let me put it this way: is this a chicken that lays egg, or is this something that we know? It's the same. This cool here and cool refers to this function.
Yeah, but it hasn't been called
Exactly.
Anywhere.
Exactly.
So if it's not being called, how would it print the console log?
Exactly. So we never call this function cool because we never see the chicken laying egg. The chicken laying egg syntax is the parentheses. So remember the parentheses as the egg. So there's a chicken name cool, and there's so in here and in here we never actually say to the chicken, you know, go lay some eggs. So we're not going to be seeing some chicken laying some eggs. So what do you think will be passing on to the placeholder? So what we will end up seeing here. Not undefined, no, because when we call the chicken3 function, we're actually passing something. But yeah, you might say undefined. Okay.
Unexpected something.
Yeah. Okay, we have unexpected error.
Maybe error because it doesn't know what cool is.
It does know, actually. It knows that cool is a function. So functions are like variables.
It will print the function. Function cool. Maybe
Okay.
it will print the function.
Okay. So we have unexpected value. We have undefined.
Can we call below?
Sorry, just function code, I would say. Yes?
Can we press cool without parentheses?
Where? At the end. Yeah, we're passing cool without parentheses here. Okay, what I want you to do is I want you to open up your code pen or code and try this and see what you get back. So try this, write this, and we'll go back in a few minutes to discuss this. So try this on your VS Code, pen. You can even use any name, but maybe chicken3 and cool will make more sense.
Error.
Just give me wait a minute, let me get back to the code.
I think it was what I said. Not exactly, but
okay. Just write. Yeah, we can discuss what you get back and. So Leon got an uncaught syntax error, invalid or unexpected token. Leon, I want you to check the syntax, double check the syntax for any typos in your code. And I'm not sure, just double check whether there's a syntax error, like misspelling or typo. And also, are you using CodePen?
No, I just print it on the console.
Okay.
I will recheck it though.
Yeah. Let's see, maybe that's the syntax errors are related with typos, so that's weird.
Yeah, it was a typo, but it still is what I said.
Okay.
The last one, I think.
Okay.
The last thing I said, it was the last thing.
Okay. So the syntax error was due to a typo, right?
Yeah. It was the result is the last thing I proposed.
Okay. So let's everyone play around with the code, see what you get, but spend some time looking at the code, at the lines, and we'll have a discussion to understand. Remember, we're discovering new things now, so maybe it doesn't make sense at first, but we're also discovering some new things that you probably didn't know. So there's some new things. Okay, I will open the console, and I will take a look at what we get. Remember, we're looking. Oops! Oh my God. We're looking at this line, this console. We're calling chicken3. We're passing a value, and we want to know what will be shown here. So let me open up the console, and what we see here. Let me hide messages. No, just give me 1 second. Maybe I find no minus frame. Okay. Anyway, I cannot hide it. Okay. So what we get back when we pass cool, which is the function name, as an argument to chicken3, what ends up in the placeholder is the whole function itself, right? It's the whole chicken, if you will. But we haven't instructed the chicken to lay an egg. We haven't put like parentheses here. So remember, a chicken has to lay eggs only if we instruct it to lay eggs. So, hey, chicken, please lay an egg. Otherwise, it's just the whole chicken. So you pass it around, and then you can instruct. So what we get back here is the whole cool function. So you can think of this egg. So so these are the things. So actually, the egg here is no, this is it. So it's the cool function, the whole cool function. So the chicken3 will just return back the whole cool function. Now, since the cool function is itself like a function, we can actually call it, right? So we can say parentheses, which means that if I imagine that this chicken will lay an egg and the egg will replace this whole highlighted code, then chicken3 parentheses cool will become cool. So this thing, if you can imagine this is equivalent to cool. So if I have cool and I can put parentheses and have the function call, I can also add parentheses here. So let's see what happens. And you can see that the function cool gets called. It's weird, I know, but remember, if you in your mind you try to say, okay, this it's an egg, it's a laying, it's a chicken, it's an egg-laying chicken, so this will become cool, right? In my mind, this will become cool. This is, you know, how it's going to end up. This is the egg, right? So if after this execution, the egg that is laid is cool, then why not put parentheses and call the function? Cool is a function. So these things are like actually work, even though it seems like pretty weird, because remember, whenever you see a chicken laying egg, you have to imagine what kind of egg you get back. If this in your mind is cool, then you will be seeing this. And this actually makes more sense than this thing. But this actually is possible in JavaScript. We can lay an egg that's actually a function. And since we get the function back, we can call that function. Now, I don't suggest that you use the syntax because it's really, really confusing. But if you actually store the egg in a variable, which makes the syntax way more like readable, so I can say egg and call it, then you will understand how you can actually get an egg back and then call that. So the egg becomes a chicken. It hatches and then you can call it. The important thing is try to remember or try to this mental model. Whenever you see a function call with a parenthesis, remember the chicken that lays an egg and try to predict what kind of egg you're going to get back. We saw kind of like an advanced egg, so don't worry too much if this doesn't make sense. You'll get the feeling as you write more and more code. But the important thing is that whenever you see the syntax, remember the chicken and try to see if you can predict the value of the egg that will be coming out of this function call. You have to learn to read the code like this. Like I say function call, the function call always gets replaced with a value, just like variables always get replaced with a value. So when I say name, and I just use the name here, the function has to be replaced by a value. So in your mind, when reading code, you also have to see, okay, what will happen when JavaScript runs this code? It will get this value. So variables are pointers to values. Function names are pointers to code that will eventually be executed or called with this thing. This is a little bit more advanced because we get an egg that's actually a chicken, and then we can instruct the chicken, or I don't know, we can say chick. Let's say small chicken that can also lay eggs and so forth.
If we have a self-running function and we store it into a variable, then it will run whatever. Because if we declare a value, a const value,
like okay,
const,
value
equals to a self-running function.
To a self-running function. Do you mean a function like this, an anonymous function?
No, self-running function. Before function, we go with a parenthesis or something like that, and it runs by itself. It doesn't wait for a call. It will run at the same time, maybe before it is stored to the variable const.
Okay.
Right?
Okay, I'm going to skip this because it's a little bit, I would say, too much for now. But one thing I have to say, that this is like a function that we declare and then we immediately call. So this is a function that we actually manually explicitly call. So this is an ordinary function that will return some value. So you can think of this as chick. We're doing the same thing like this. But instead of defining the function elsewhere and calling it, we're doing it in one place. So, but I don't want you to like, at least for the rest of you, I don't want you to get confused with this one. But it's a function that it called. You get back an egg, and the egg will be stored here. So same thing, same principle. This is a chicken laying egg. Here's the declaration, and here's the egg laying part. So, but let's. I'm going to hide this. This is way too advanced for now. Okay, so now that we know a little bit more about how to work, how function calls work. I don't know, would you like to see something more on the function chicken part before we move on back to the promises? We can try things out, we can experiment. We can answer questions. Okay, if something comes up, feel free to share. One key point here, whenever you see a chicken laying eggs, a function name and the egg symbol, either empty or with some arguments, just try to stop there, pause for a moment and say, okay, what will this be when the code actually executes? Just do this experiment whenever you see the syntax. It will help you understand how JavaScript works under the hood. So try this experiment. What is this chicken laying here? And of course, console log or run the code to actually see. But it's important to get this concept. Functions get called and they always return a value. So I'm going back here. And now that we know the chicken egg, can you better understand the difference between these two? Like syntax. Like what's the first case? What's the second? Where do we have a chicken laying eggs? Where do we have like just the whole chicken? So in the first case, what are we passing to them? Are we passing an egg or the whole chicken? That's good. Yeah. So we have the chicken here, the function name, and we say, okay, please lay an egg. So the chicken will go into the hatching process or the, I don't know, whatever, and it will lay an egg. So this is like to remind you that we're expecting an egg. So this is like egg, not just the chicken, it's an egg that is instructed to lay an egg. So in this case, we're going to get an egg. What kind of egg are we going to get back? So what is this highlighted line going to be replaced by? What's the egg here? I could even write it like this if it helps, like how you. So what's the egg here? So what's that?
And the success on private on console.
So we're going to see console log handle success. Okay, but what is the egg? But this is something that we call a side effect. We will see something in the console, but what will be the egg? The egg is something concrete. It's not just something we see in the console. There's a value. So what will this be replaced? Remember, this will be replaced during runtime. A chicken always goes away and leaves an egg in its place. The chicken isn't there. So what will the egg contain at this point? What's the rule? How do we find the egg? What do we see to find in a function? Undefined. Why is that?
Because we don't define it.
We don't define it? Yes. How do we define the egg in a function?
So,
how do we define the egg value in a function?
let's like
Equals,
anything.
I don't know, egg,
So,
I guess. And how do we make the chicken like
return,
a return? Exactly. Exactly. So in this case, how do we find our way from the chicken to the egg? We go to the chicken function and we see if there's a return statement. If the return statement returns an egg, we know what the egg will be. If there's no return statement, that's why I mentioned a couple of weeks ago that it's always nice, even if you don't decide to return an egg, to always put this thing in your functions. So always start your function by return undefined, because this is what happens by default if there's no return statement in a function. JavaScript will magically, automatically put this at the end of a function. If you don't have a return statement, this will always be there. So just to get more close to what JavaScript does, always put a return undefined in your function to remember that the egg will be undefined. Then once you get a more concrete, I don't know, like a choice, you will replace this with, let's say, an egg. But start with return undefined so that this will stick with you, that functions always return an egg, non-defined. Otherwise, okay. So we have the egg, which is, then I will go back to here. No, undefined. Okay, so the egg is undefined. So in here, what we're passing is, we say response, then undefined in this case. Okay, what are we doing in this case? What do we pass as an argument to then? Is this an egg? Is this a chicken? I think a chicken, exactly. So handle success, the whole thing. So if I was able to go inside the then code, which I can because it's not my code, it's the browser's code. If I were to go inside the then and console log the parameter, I would see the whole chicken. I would see this. Let me see. Okay. I would see this thing. We're passing the whole chicken. Without the parentheses, there's no instruction to lay eggs. Just pass the chicken around so someone else can get the chicken and lay some eggs. So it might sound silly, but if silly things can help you remember some concepts, it's a good thing. So it's a chicken egg. It sounds silly, but I think it will stick with you. Okay, so that's the difference between the handle success. In the case of then, we just pass a function. We don't call it. And let me get. Okay, I will get rid of this. Okay. So we have a promise that goes out there, reaches to some server, and gets back a response. And then if it's successful, remember, right now we are, where was that? I think, yeah. So we're here, and we're just handling the result, the successful, this. We're using then to handle the result, the success response. But there's always an error that might happen, a rejection. So we need to handle also that. So the way that we do it, and I can put this in another line, is we can use the cats and with another function that's called handle error. I don't know. So I'm going to define another function, another chicken, and I'm going to pass this right here. So now I have the response, which is a promise. We console log, then we saw that this was a promise in pending state. So this was like the, what was that again? Okay, so let me put it here. So we had the promise, the response variable, it's promise in pending. Then we use then and cats right here in what it's called the chaining mode. So after dot then, we immediately say dot cats. I can put this in one line if you want. Most of the times it's okay. We just put this in separate lines just so we can read it a little bit like a story. So I would stick with it's just new lines and spaces.
Is it the same to try catch?
Yes. No, the question is it is the same to try cats? No, it's slightly different. The then cats is kind of like the promise way of try catching. So we will see try cats in a different syntax with a single way. But for now, promises are handled using then and cats. That's one way. We'll see try cats. Okay. Now, so we have like a response, a promise, pending, and now remember we are going to be so pass a chicken for handle success, pass a chicken for handling errors. Or I don't know, error. Or maybe error. There are different kinds of errors. So we have a response, and then remember, we can either have then or cuts, not both. And we'll see both of them. We'll try to break things so we can see the error. Now, I don't have like enough space here. Let me see if I can just remove some things and make some space. So you can see that I have placed a console log here, handle success and handle error. So when either of these functions get actually called, we will see handle success or handle error, right? So right now my promise was in pending mode, and then it decided to take either a resolve or a reject route. What is the route that we get to see here? So are we ending up here, or do we end up here in the let's say cuts rejected? So which one of these two is actually getting executed? Just one of them. Is this a successful or is this a unsuccessful response? So it's the then that gets called and subsequently calls handle success, right? So we can see this function gets executed, handle success, not this one, so we know that we are right here. Now, if the response, the promise that it's pending, something goes wrong, we will end up in the cuts. So if something goes wrong here, we will end up here, not in the top. So if I break the response, so right now it's successful, and what I will try to do to just create an error artificially, let's say, I will just go here and I will mess this up. So I will just create something that's, let me see if okay. So I just messed up the web address. There's no HTTPS SSZ on the internet, so it's obviously an error. And then you will see that right now, I found myself in the handle error. I found myself in the cuts, which calls the handle error function, which console logs the handle error. So there's no handle success. We see there's an error warning here. It's nice that we see that URL scheme, blah, blah, blah. We'll see why this happens. But we end up here. So if I go back to the diagram, now I'm here. Okay, so we took this route, got back the, I think the Chuck Norris joke, then we broke the URL and we ended up here. Now, if I go back to the finally, was a nice finally somewhere. Yeah, so remember that after either then or cuts, like a success or an error happens, we end up on the finally. This last step is the same for both cases. We always end up to some. Now, this thing is actually a syntax right here. So I will add another function. I will chain another function right here, call it finally. So, and I will have to define a function. Function final console log. Oops. And then handle final after then or cuts. We don't know which one, but we always end up here. So we start with a promise that's in pending mode. It breaks, so we end up here. We see the handle error, and at the end, we always get to the final. So we always read the final. Now, if I fix the promise and I fix the URL, the promise will go from pending to success, then, and finally. So response then cuts, or response cuts, response then finally, or response cuts finally. but we always end up here. So let me fix the address here, and let's see the route. That it's going to be handle success, handle final, and we end up like here. So we took this route. Oh, sorry, where was that? Nice. Okay, so we went through this route, we went through this route, and we saw how we can handle a fetch promise that goes out there to a server, gets something, and finally. So just to give you an example of when we would like use finally, it's not always the case that we need it finally, but one example is the printer. We switch on the printer, we either print or we're out of ink, but at the end, we always want to turn off the printer. Now, I'm not sure whether there's a printer that we can control with JavaScript, but another real example that we can use is you start a response, so you start a fetch request. Your users opens up Facebook and they try to load the timeline. So you do a fetch request. Now, whenever you start going out to a server and try to load something, there is going to be some time that this request is going to take, like 1 second, 2 seconds. And what we do is when we start a network request is we usually start like showing a timer. So like a spinning wheel so that the user knows that the browser is working, is trying to connect to Facebook. And then we either succeed or fail. Facebook might be, I don't know, having problems. So I might try to load my Facebook profile, but maybe Facebook is having a problem. And I either get a then or a catch, resolve or reject. Now, when both of these, or when either of these ends, I want to remove the spinner, the loading spinner, because it means that the request is here, either successfully or unsuccessfully. So a thing that I might use in a fetch promise chain in the finally is to just hide the spinner, like just remove the loading spinner. So I will do just that here, and but I want to result. Let me see if I can. So I will say, let me see how can I manage this. I will try to do a request that takes some time. So
you want to do a loading thing?
Yes, but I believe there's the JSON placeholder can also give me back like a request that takes a few seconds.
Another div of HTML that has a text loading for some simple loading thing.
So no, I'm just display very, very simple loading div. So I will change the URL. Oh, wait a minute. I will use a different address. Doesn't return like and what was that? The JSON placeholder. Let's see. And this nice API allows me to add like a delay, like 3 seconds. And I will add some. Okay, I will add some things just for. Okay, don't worry about this. I'm just going to add some delay on these requests, so don't worry about the URL. It's going to take like 3 seconds, so we will actually get to see the request taking some time because this request is way too fast. So the response is taking, let's see if we can see like the, so let's see the delay. So I will just run the code or success, 3 seconds, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so you see there's a delay now. The code runs in after 3 seconds. I just added the delay. So what I do is I can say, like right before the response, the fetch like goes away, to the server, I will say, Let me, I will put this a little bit further down. And right when the response starts fetching, I will say document body inner HTML. So this is I'm accessing the body, the HTML body element, and I'm adding this loading text. So I'm replacing the inner HTML content of the body tag with some text. Okay. Now, after the request either succeeds or fails, I want to disable this, to disable like the loading, and say like request, I don't know, like finished. So I will go to the final, and I will say got our response back. So let's see, it's loading. And after 3 seconds, when the finally gets executed, we just change the screen to got our response back. So we change the document body or whatever we want in loading when we start the promise. It either resolves or rejects. And then at the end, sorry, no, this is the correct one. In the finally, we know that the request was over, and then we change the screen from loading to you know, whatever. So in here, we get fetch, you change to loading, goes here, then goes here, then goes here. So this final function will actually change the body back to inner HTML. Okay. Now I want to try also with an error. What happens if the response failed? Will I see the got our response back? So I will just break the URL again. Let's see. So it runs, and then it's just, we don't see a loading, and we see just the got our response back. Let me see if I can. Okay, I will explain why this happened. I will just do another error. Let me, okay, I will explain what. Okay, loading, got a response back. Okay, in both cases, the promise results in an error. It's rejecting. I'm changing the prototype. The protocol. I'm changing this. The problem is here is that the error happens way too fast. So it loads and then immediately it fails, and we get to catch the error. And that's because only in a successful request we get the delay of 3 seconds. So in this case, this actually happens too fast. You will see the loading very, very fast in the beginning, but we immediately get back. So that's because in an unsuccessful response, we never get to reach the server, which actually adds the delay of 3 seconds. So at this point, there's no way to kind of like delay the error. The error happens immediately. The browser says that there's nothing here, there's no address, ZZZ. So, but in both cases, the important thing is that we start with the loading state, and then finally we get the response back. Now, let's see. Okay, so questions? We will do a recap of what we covered so that we can sum up and we can conclude and we can move on to practice and taking a break, of course. Anything related to?
Yes, if you want to do another break, because
Okay, so I will sum it up just to recap of what we've covered, and then we're going to have like a long break, and then you'll go and practice all these things. So whenever there's some command in JavaScript that actually takes quite some time to, to complete, give back like a response or something, like a network request or maybe a timer. So whenever we have some command that might take some time, we use what it's called a promise. And this promise follows this route. So we say, go out there and go to a server and find me some data. This might take 1 second, 50 milliseconds, or maybe 5 minutes, I don't know. So we have a promise that it's promising to give back some results. Now, there are two cases. Either it fails or succeeds. It's either one or the other. No case where we have both a success and a failure, okay? Whenever we have a successful response, a successful completion of this promise, because there are other promise-based functions, not just fetch, we use the then, we supply a function, and that function handles the result. If we go to the error route, we use the cats, we supply a function, and then we run some code that will eventually display something to the user, to the console, or whatever. And then at the end, if either of these routes, gets to the point to reject or resolve, we get back to the finally. So we can add like a finally statement there, and then we can deal with like the end of the promise. So switch the printer off, stop the loading spinner, I don't know, do something. So that's like the overall concept. This is the code. We use like command like fetch that actually returns a promise. We stick, like we connect then, cats, and finally. Most of the times, like in this order. This is how we handle success. This is how we handle the error, and this is how after either then or cats we end up at the handle final function. One thing I didn't mention, and I will leave you to play and experiment and discover it after the break, during the practice time, is that we can have a parameter for both the error function and the success function. So you will discover what this is all about during practice. In the successful function, this is the response, the data that we get back from the server. The Chuck Norris joke, the weather JSON, the JSON placeholder, whatever the service or the server is giving back to us, it will end up here in the success function as the first parameter. So after the break, you will play around and see what the data is. Check the type of, check if it's undefined or an array. And then if we get to reject, we can also pass a parameter here on the error handling function, and this will contain the error, what the type of error is, and some other information. So we can either retry, for example, the request if there's a network request error, or we can display some message to the user, unauthorized request. You try to access something that requires login, so you're missing password, or there's no network, or I don't know. So you will discover this after the break, which is the time that you have to practice this and also maybe try these things on your project. So before taking a break, any last questions? So we can sum it up. Mm-hmm.
That is the default name.
Where?
Data.
Mm-hmm.
Or the default name.
No.
Like error. When we write error, it's default error come from console log.
We can console log both the error and the data. Okay. And the name that I use here can be anything. So this is arbitrary. But whenever you name your parameters, instead of writing here X, which makes no sense, you try to use a name that actually refers to what kind of thing that will be placed here. So in here, we're expecting an error, so it makes sense to name this error. In here, if, for example, we're expecting a joke, it's probably better to say joke.
What is that?
But or data for generic. So if you know that you're expecting a joke, it's better to use joke. If you're expecting weather data, put weather data. If you don't know what kind of data, maybe use data. But the more specific you are, the better for you to understand the code. But the name for the parameters is arbitrary, like it's whatever you want. But try to use something that makes sense. Okay, so we will be back after half an hour, and then you'll just take all this. I will send you the code pen, and you'll take the code. I will send you the two URLs, the Chuck Norris and the JSON placeholder, and maybe we find some other sillier one. And you can just experiment with fetching something, console logging the error, displaying something on the screen, check the type of the data that you get back, just explore. So this will be just trying things out and getting back some data, displaying something on the screen, and then just trying some stuff out, practice. And it might also be a good thing to actually test your bookaholics. Maybe go there, see if you have a fetch, try things out. I believe you are using like the Google Books API, so you can try things with the fetching from the Google Books API. So just practice the things that we learned. And if you have questions, we discuss them, and it's nice to share the insights. Okay, so we'll be staying in touch through Slack, and we'll see you in 30 minutes, okay?